So joining me here in New York City is CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman and attorney Carissa Kranz. Ladies, thanks so much for being here. So Ricky, the question today is not on the order's constitutionality. You've been sort of hammering that. Explain what's actually going to happen.
Most of the press has looked at this as if this hearing before this three-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit is going to say whether or not the executive order is constitutional or not. However, with this situation, things are not always narrow.
It's interesting. One of the things I find really fascinating about this, Carissa, is the Attorney General in Washington State is suing, according to the brief, on behalf of the people in Washington State. What's interesting is he didn't even ask the judge to extend this injunction to people who have never been in the country, people who've never set foot in the country, but he did. He made this a global injunction. Why did he go beyond what was asked by the Attorney General?
You know, I think one thing that's actually really interesting is they're going back sort of on the executive order and making it more broad to be more favorable to Trump in saying that the executive order won't apply to people that are already permanent residents, which it's interesting because, as it was just stated, the Ninth Circuit is, generally a liberal court. But it really could go either way, and there's a whole lot. It's totally up in the air.
Right.
3 different things could happen tonight.
All right, that's something we're going to be talking about. Each party will have 30 minutes to make their case. It's going to begin at about 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back on the other side of it with a whole lot more analysis from our panel. Stay with us. You're watching CBSN. And here in New York City, we've got attorneys Ricky Kleeman and Carissa Kranz. All right, so each party will have 30 minutes, Carissa, to make their case in the next 5 minutes or so. Explain what's going to go down. How's it going to go down?
Well, there's a couple different scenarios that can happen. I see 3 main scenarios that can happen. The first one is that this could become a political decision, and the Ninth Circuit is going to, which is generally a liberal court, is going to rule in favor of the district court in upholding the temporary restraining order and treat it like a temporary injunction. Or they could say that there should be that the government has plenary power to run foreign affairs and national security and immigration the way they would like to, and that the president's decision should stand and that the court should not get involved. Or they could say, you know what, a temporary restraining order is not a temporary injunction, and return this back to the district court and allow the district court to continue its briefing, which is right now up until February 17th, and then a hearing will be on the briefing for the injunction, and then decide whether or not a temporary injunction is really on the table. Because right now it's a temporary restraining order, which is different, but the court seems to be treating it like a temporary injunction, even though it is a restraining order. But in theory, restraining orders really aren't supposed to be appealed unless there's an interlocutory order. So it appears, though, we'll see what happens. There's just so many scenarios that could happen. It could be a political decision, it could be a court decision, or it could be returned back.
Ricky, let me ask you that question. If you were able to go back and look at the way that this order was drafted, what would you have done differently?
Well, I think it's not only a drafting problem, it's a roll-up problem. What happened instead was it got rolled out at a very odd hour without much explanation or any at all, and people reacted the way you would expect many people to react, which is to say that it was a Muslim ban.
If this court comes back and they say to the government, look, we're standing with Washington, Minnesota, Carissa, what does the government then do?
Well, most likely this is going to go on appeal no matter what happens today.
No matter what happens, right.
And the next step is probably going to be an en banc hearing with the Ninth Circuit, and then it's going to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And depending on what happens at the Ninth Circuit, the Supreme Court will hear the case. And it's important to note that the Supreme Court is understaffed right now. So if it is a deadlock and it is a 4-4 decision, whatever the Ninth Circuit decides will stand.
Oh, that's interesting. Right now it's being live streamed. The travel ban appeals here in the state of Washington versus the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Thank you again for appearing on such short notice. We are adjourned.
Here in the studio, I have Ricky Kleeman, CBS News legal analyst, and Carissa Kranz, attorney. Also in Washington, Paula Reed, our CBS News justice reporter, and in Los Angeles, Robert Bamille, former U.S. Senior Deputy District Attorney, now practicing attorney in Southern California. Thank you all. A lot of ground to cover here. And Ricky, let me begin with you. I want to get everyone's take on what stood out most. And this was an hour-long proceeding for people who may have just been tuning in. This was an opportunity for both sides, the government of the United States as well as Washington State, to present their arguments once more in oral fashion to these judges. What, Ricky, do you think was most significant? I know towards the end there you were jotting furiously as one of the judges was questioning the government's attorney.
One of the things that I think stands out is that what you have here is what we would call a hot bench. This is a bench of 3 judges who have really done their homework, who are interested in this case, who know the background of immigration laws, who know the background of cases. And one of the things the public does not understand, who is listening to this and probably reacting on the Twitter sphere, is that this is what judges are supposed to do.
What the viewers might see is what's going on. There's a whole bunch of legalese going back and forth. The lawyers are talking a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo, and then the judges are jumping in with these complicated questions that might throw the lawyers into a tailspin on how they may or may not want to answer it. That is one of the things about oral argument that is unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. You can go there with a speech written on what you want to say, and judges are going to jump in because they're going to want to be able to analyze something and write an opinion that's well thought out. The Ninth Circuit is a traditionally liberal circuit. I would not be surprised at all if they uphold the stay on the travel ban and allow the district court and defer to the district court to continue their briefing on the preliminary injunction, which is supposed to be finished, I believe, next week or February 17th. And then today was more, even though we got into the merits at oral argument, it was not really supposed to be about the merits. Mm-hmm. Today is whether or not, the executive order is going to stand while the merits are well thought out in the legal process, which could take time and travel all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
But essentially what I took away from it was a lack of clarity in the executive order seems to have left these judges wondering about the best way now to approach clarity. And should that be something the judges should do, or is that something that is on the executive branch? Can you help us understand that?
Sure. The basis that the executive orders such as this one should be interpreted would be a rational basis review, right? So you can't have a ban against the Muslims, you can't have a ban against a country's origin or a religion, but you can have a ban if national security is at risk. So they're going to be determining whether or not the merits are weighed in favor of immigration interests or national security interests. Going forward, we don't really know how they're going to come down. They probably are going to send it back to the district court. There's deference to the district court, allow them to consider the preliminary injunction briefing. And then it would be rational, you have a rational basis review, it would be rational for the president and Congress and the powers that are vested within the president for national security and foreign policy. It would make sense for them to redraft the order so there wouldn't be all these concerns. However, it doesn't seem like they want to do that. It seems like they want to go forward and, execute their right to have these executive orders and let the courts, argue and take it all the way through the process. It seems that Trump's administration believes that they have a strong argument that they can win this. And, but it does seem that the executive order probably should be redrafted because there are exceptions that now they're verbally carving out, but it's not written. Mm-hmm. And now we're supposed to just trust.
In the green card, the case of people who are green card holders, et cetera. Right.
So we're supposed to trust on goodwill now, mm-hmm. that the exceptions are going to be carved out based on verbal exceptions, and how is that going to be enforced? Mm-hmm. It would make sense that they would redraft this during the stay and then have an executive order that made more sense, that wouldn't unleash the chaos that that sent the media into a frenzy.
Yeah.
So far, it seems that they're willing to litigate this, every little piece of it, every step of the way. So it doesn't seem that's the path they're going to take.
Thanks to my panel, Ricky Kleeman, Carissa Kranz, Paula Reed, and Ron Bamille. Thank you all so much for your insight. Appreciate it.